Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about ecotourism. My name is Alex Catuso.
I'm Alex Trujillo.
I'm Amy Boyle.
And I'm Hachi.
All right, so first we should start off by understanding what ecotourism is. According to the Oxford Dictionary, ecotourism is tourism directed toward exotic, often threatened natural environments intended to support conservation efforts and observe wildlife. Ecotourism seeks to unite communities, conservation efforts, and sustainable travel in a way that is educational for both guests and staff. Companies and groups who choose to implement ecotourism must also adopt several principles in order to be adequately considered experts in ecotourism. These principles include minimize social, physical, behavioral, and psychological impacts, build environmental and cultural awareness and respect, provide positive experiences for both visitors and hosts, provide direct financial benefits for conservation, generate financial benefits for both local people and private industry, deliver memorable interpretive experiences to visitors that help raise sensitivity to host countries' political, environmental, and social climates, design, construct, and operate low-impact facilities, and recognize the rights and spiritual beliefs of the indigenous people in your community and work in partnership with them to create empowerment.
So we want to identify a couple of the economic factors around ecotourism. So some of the incentives are increased income for the locals in the area, which in turn, in order to protect their income source, they'll want to protect the animals and the habitat that is bringing them in. So it helps promote preservation of the rare wildlife in their communities. So market forces, a study found that the majority of ecotourists are middle and upper class people from foreign countries who mainly live in cities or suburban areas who don't have access to these, I guess, exotic places that they want to go experience. So international travel agencies also really push ecotourism because I guess they view it as a more sustainable way to be a tourist. And another driving force is the poverty of these local areas and the income that they get from commercializing their natural areas. Market failures can be a resort to overcrowding, like you see in the picture here. You can see a bunch of people in these iguana breeding grounds trampling on the areas. And if you have overcrowding, it can also lead to environmental damage of those natural areas that you're trying to showcase. And then some unintended consequences of ecotourism can be a commercialization and gentrification of the local areas because of this massive increase of income. There'll be people that want to capitalize on it and won't necessarily have the best interests of the environment in mind. So it can push out the locals who naturally live there, can result in increased pollution if not done properly, and also animal trafficking that these places might want to import some animals in order to make it more of an attraction to promote more guests coming there.
Next, we're going to go over the significance and impact on the communities affected by ecotourism. And first, I want to start with the pros. With the growth of ecotourism, revenue has increased from park entrance fees and indirect expenditures on hotel rooms, rental cars, and food. Now, ecotourists spend between 93 and 233 billion annually in these developing countries. As Alex said, tourism is found to increase opportunities for the rural poor in their own communities. It also has the potential to help reduce rural outmigration to urban areas. Increased employment opportunities is also found in these urban poor areas because of ecotourism, and it gives them additional income to provide for their families. An example of poverty reduction from ecotourism can be found in areas in Costa Rica where they found that 16% of neighboring communities saw great reductions in poverty. Another bonus is that women are also greatly affected by ecotourism and are highly employed in the industry. This is a graph, and it's the rise in international tourism by region is on the top, and then you can see the percent increase of income on the bottom between 1985 and 1998. And you can see big increases in East Asia and specifically in Africa. And you can see how tourism, especially ecotourism, is affecting the incomes of these developing countries. Now I want to talk about the cons of ecotourism. There has been a trend in ecotourism revenues in less developed countries that leak back to industrialized countries. The World Bank estimated in 1988 that 55% of gross revenues for all tourism in developing world eventually returned to the industrialized countries. And even some studies put a figure as high as 90%, which was found in the Bahamas and Nepal. As Alex said before as well, governments are found to resettle certain indigenous groups. And this is found specifically in Africa, where we've seen the Maasai herdsmen being resettled out of Kenya and Tanzania. But overall, there's evidence that would suggest that ecotourism has been successful in reducing poverty to some degree in these developing countries.
Okay, so I'll be talking about stakeholders of ecotourism. So a stakeholder is a party that has an interest in a company and can either affect or be affected by the business. So in this case, the company is ecotourism. And some of the major stakeholders that I'll be talking about are the tourists, the local communities, local governments, tourism agencies, and NGOs. So a tourist or tourists are individuals wishing to experience travel to natural areas that conserves the environment without damaging or disturbing the environment. Some reasons for travel include education, providing financial benefits for conservation, building cultural awareness and respect, and generating financial benefits for local communities. In this picture, the two individuals in the middle would probably be the tourists, and then the two on the outside are probably from the local community. So local communities are communities that reside in locations of ecotourism, and then through ecotourism, local communities are empowered to fight against poverty and achieve sustainable development. Local governments are government agencies and locations of ecotourism. Their main goal is to improve accessibility, provide employment and training, marketing, promotion, sustainable tourism and development, investment, research and planning, and safety and security. Some negative aspects about local governments can be that they lack commitment or capability to manage ecotourism sites, or they can be overly invested in the financial benefits that result from ecotourism, and then they neglect to enforce the environmental precautions to protect these local environments. And then tourism agencies are agencies that lead safe travel to ecotourism environments. So again, this picture is from the first slide, except for the two individuals on the outside are most likely the people from the local communities that work for the tourism agencies. So like this next bullet says, they are sometimes from the local community. They educate tourists, they help contribute to financial benefits to conservation and local communities. And then some negative aspects about tourism agencies is they can commercialize the area that people are traveling to. And then the last stakeholder would be NGOs. So an NGO is a nonprofit organization that operates independently of any government, typically whose purpose is to address social or political issues. And then in the case of ecotourism, they balance economic development, environmental conservation, and sociocultural revitalization. And then the International Ecotourism Society is probably the biggest NGO for ecotourism.
So this slide just highlights some relevant policies in the United States regarding how we handle ecotourism in our own country. And these are kind of governed by each agency. They have different programs or policies that they've implemented. So for instance, the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, that kind of governs everything, while within the U.S. Department of Agriculture, they have mostly educational policies, such as the Leave No Trace program that I'm sure everyone's heard of. The National Park Service is kind of self-explanatory to preserve our national parks in a sustainable way. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they are guided by the National Wildlife Refuge System Improvement Act, as well as the Urban Conservation Treaty for Migratory Birds. The Bureau of Land Management, they mainly are guided by the National Watchable Wildlife Program and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They're guided by the National Marine Sanctuary Program, Coastal Zone Management Act, and National Sea Grant Act. I wasn't able to find any specific failures with all of these. It seems like for the most part, they're all being used effectively.
Okay, so whether you're a tourist, business, or a wandering traveler, there are a few things you can do to live a more eco-friendly life outside of your own home. Firstly, whenever you travel, purchase locally made souvenirs and crafts. This is because buying locally made goods, though typically more expensive, benefits the area directly and helps keep their economy going. Second, research your accommodation and tour operator. Those who do the research prior to the trip will be more informed of these companies' business practices and just how sustainable they are, as well as how knowledgeable their tour staff is on sustainability and eco-friendly practices. Travelers should also be wary of tourist destinations greenwashing, which is the practice in which companies market their business as sustainable without actually being so. Finally, opt for public transportation whenever possible. This practice is very doable in most destinations and is the cheaper and more environmentally friendly option. Thank you for listening. We hope you learned a little bit more about ecotourism and plan to implement some of these practices in the next time you travel.